From high school phenom to bar league champion,
hailing from the northern reaches and talking about his get good goal,
it's Austin Deep Dig Devlin.
Welcome back, all you talented humans. Today we're talking with Austin Deep Dig Devlin about his get good goal. As always, I'm Nick. That's Eric. We're the Get Good Guys.
And this is the Get Good Guide.
Good morning. How are you?
Good morning to you.
Nice and early on this recording morning.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Having only recently experienced daylight saving time. No S at the end of saving, by the way. It's an important
that'll
note.
fill a good chunk of our show today.
Yeah. That will be a 90-minute discussion. No, point of fact, we will be having a little bit longer episode today. Not the tight 9-minute resource that we typically do, because we have a very special guest with us.
Indeed.
Our inaugural
the very first.
Get Good guest. And that is Austin Devlin. Austin, how are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm good. How are you guys?
Oh, we're a little sleepless, but that's okay.
Doing great.
I heard a story that you were out partying pretty hard last night.
Yeah, I was sitting comfortably in a squishy foldable chair watching some sporting events.
At our age, I think that qualifies.
That's the way to do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, what were you watching?
UFC.
Don't share the results.
$2.99.
Don't. Please don't. Because
There's that one where that one guy won.
Yeah, it was one of the fighters was victorious.
Yeah, he was shortish, tallish, lightish, darkish hair. Yeah,
he was kind of a grappler, stand-up kind of striker.
Yeah,
Yeah, and there was this guy that introduced him for a long time. It's pretty cool.
So we in the Get Good guest spots, and you are of course the inaugural Get Good guest here on the podcast. But you are also one of the testers of the guide.
Yeah, for sure. Someone's got to go first, and I'll do my best.
Do you remember? It was actually, I think, years ago when we sent, because I remember phase 1 we wrote. Nick, remind me.
2020. I think 2020, and then we sent out a couple of phase 1s because we wrote that first.
Yep.
And we had a handful of people give it a go, a Get Good go, if you will. But I think you were the one who gave us the most feedback and kind of put the most effort in, so that was cool to see.
Yeah, definitely the most dedicated of the testers.
Didn't help that the other ones were our wives, so
that was mixed results.
Yeah,
mixed results on the output. Yeah. And so you had kind of given some feedback on phase 1, and then when we finished out the rest of the guide over the course of another year or two. Sent that out, and you were kind of on the cusp of a couple different goals. What were you thinking about? Was this always the Get Good goal, or did you think about a bunch of different goals before you kind of undertook this?
Yeah, so I first got the guide from you in December 14th of 2020, which is
exact date.
No, nobody likes to show off.
No, I just looked through my email, searched your name. But anyway, I had no clue. It was a lot to look at, and I thought it was super, super awesome. I'm also in education like you guys, so developing skills and stuff is something that I look at every day. But for me, it was really tough to pick one thing to get good at, because typically I don't like to do things that I'm not good at. And so having to pick one thing was super tough, but I think I narrowed it down. I picked at first a couple things to do with sports that I switched away from, and then I thought maybe I'll get good at cooking. And then I decided that cooking is a ton of work, and I changed my mind. And then I sort of took a break for a little while, until then I started this new diet and accidentally stumbled into wanting to get good at following this diet and this plan that we made. So that's where I landed. That's where I'm at now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The idea of, it's almost as though it's a combination of sort of the discipline of following something and the skill set that takes, but also then the sort of nitty gritty of, an eating plan or a diet plan, however you want to think about it.
And I think it's interesting to think about being able to switch what you're interested in, especially if you're using a guide or, to learn something you want to be doing versus something you have to do necessarily. I think it's an interesting kind of course of events to be able to kind of pull the ripcord and switch to this or that until you find something that you really want to work on.
For sure. Yeah, and that's what kind of happened. I popped around a little bit to maybe 6 different things, and then finally found one where I could really implement the guide and stick to it.
Yeah, right on. And so we were thinking, because like I said, this is the inaugural Get Good Guest episode, but we're thinking, it may be helpful to kind of understand background a little bit. You had mentioned that you're an educator. Give us a little bit of sort of like skill acquisition in the past, right? What are the things that you've done that have been, maybe activities or sports or skills or, even your professional skill set? Like, what has been the course or the methodology of acquiring skills in your life to this point?
Yeah, up till now, it's been the grind. Just lots and lots of time spent repeating things, skills, and different tactics and mental exercises in order to do the things that I did at the level that I did them. It wasn't often that it was just something I could just do immediately, but pretty soon afterwards, with the right approach and stuff, I was able to get it done for the athletics.
Do you feel like you obviously had coaching and stuff for to kind of add some framework, but do you feel like you often found yourself kind of stumbling upon these tactics, or do you feel like you laid out a plan ahead of time to decide, this is what I want to accomplish and this is how I'm going to do it? Do you have like one of those that tends to, for your personal self, you tend to lean towards?
Back in high school and college when I was competing, no direct approach. It just kind of happened. And it was like, hey, I want to do this thing. So then I just did it. I had some, I guess, natural talent, and I was able to do that. But after that time period, I started playing a new sport, and I was terrible when I started. And
the new sport was?
Volleyball.
Oh, it was volleyball.
What was the old sport?
I was diving, springboard diving.
Ah, cool.
And so you were a springboard diver in high school and then also in college for a time?
Yes.
Gotcha.
Out of curiosity, did you play other, for lack of a better term, like ball sports in high school?
Never, ever. I practiced diving 6 days a week.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
And so there was no time.
Yeah, so you went to pretty big school, if I'm not... Am I remembering that right? Did you go to Buffalo?
Not Buffalo, but nearby town.
Gotcha.
Buffalo adjacent. That old space, yeah.
That old nugget. And so you had said, okay, I was diving 6 days a week, so obviously taking it pretty seriously. What sort of competitive success?
At my peak, I finished 7th in my state, New York State, and that was pretty sweet.
Yeah.
That was as a junior. Senior year did not go great. I was dealing with some crap.
Junior, this is in high school or college?
High school. I
Cool.
did 1 year in college and then had a little bit of a breaking point and decided to be done.
It
but
happens.
Burnout was crazy.
Do you mind if we drill down on that a little bit and just ask you a couple
ahead.
questions about that breaking point?
Sure.
So, I mean, you know this because you've seen the guide. You've been around the guide for probably the third longest of any person. That valley of despair where you just kind of, it's like, oh, this is forever. This slog or this effort, this continuous improvement effort is going to be joyless in perpetuity. The breaking point, you don't have to get into specifics if you don't want to, but how do we sort of like, what did that feel like, or are there cautionary tales to take from that?
Yeah, it definitely didn't feel great at the time, to go from something that I loved to do and would do just for fun to almost turning into a job, but I guess that's not really the right way to put it. It became a chore, and I started to really dislike what I was doing with my time and the stress I was putting on myself. Yep, what's up?
Did you feel like that happened pretty quickly, or did it happen slowly?
I think it was a gradual build, as far as I can tell. I haven't thought about it yet, which way it was, if it was just something that a switch flipped or if it was something that was building. I would imagine it was something that was building, but yeah, at a certain point, I just did not enjoy what I was doing anymore, and I can't exactly pinpoint why, but I think it was just a bunch of things that finally led to that point.
Some of the things that we talk about in the Valley of Despair are in that joyless practice that can happen. You know, obviously, if you're finishing the top 10 in a state like, especially New York State, hugely populous state, you know, you're obviously at the very, very tip top of people doing that, and it's a relatively uncommon skill set, diving or springboard diving. So I have to believe that you were well within the top, probably 1 or 0.1% of the populace.
Right.
And so, you know, we've talked about, okay, well, that as a goal is going to require a pretty significant, you know, practice to the point of perhaps not being able to maintain joyfulness. You would have been around other people doing it, right? What was the oeuvre? Was the oeuvre or the sort of milieu, to use a different French word? What was the feeling around people doing that skill at that level? Were other people? Did you look around and like other people were really psyched and happy, or were a lot of people kind of suffering in the way that you were?
At my level?
Yeah.
Couldn't really tell. Didn't know enough. I didn't think about it at all back then. I don't really know. I would imagine. Well, we all had fun. And then when I was in college, it was kind of tough to gauge because I practiced alone. At that point where I decided to stop competing, tough to speak on other people's behalf, but you know, in high school and stuff, I had a really close club team, and we all loved being there, hanging out every day.
Can I ask why you're practicing mostly alone in university?
I was the only one on the team for the diving team. At least for the men.
For sure.
There were 2 girls that I dove with, but they practiced at different times, and I practiced alone.
What sort of supports did you have in practicing, or was it literally just you getting up, going and doing this, you know, really, you know, very precise set of skills?
I had a diving head coach, and I also had an ex-diver who was also there to help out. He was kind of like strength and conditioning, and then also he was a very, very good diver, and he was kind of like a role model for me throughout high school. I knew him. He was a local kid. And then in college, he ended up being an assistant coach for me. So I had the 2 of them. But being alone at practice is really difficult, like, besides just the coaches.
Right. You know, it's not certainly, there's no room for camaraderie in the coach-athlete relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think this is like, it's interesting. You know, we're kind of like run up against 2 things of one, just the difficulty and slog of trying to grow past an already great standpoint of skills, and then on top of that, losing, you know, your kind of crew of people that you enjoy being with is also, you know, really tough.
Yeah, it was a drastic change to go from high school, my high school team and my club team, to just me and my coaches, and then occasionally some of the women divers that were on the girls team, and that was really tough.
Well, and I know this. So I ran track in college, high jump primarily, which track is similar in that it's, you know, it's not the forefront of athletics. You know, it's not football, it's not basketball in you know, in America here. And on top of that, it's not the forefront of events, right? Like pole vaulting is similar, or javelin. And unless you're at a very, very good school, or a school that really works hard to accommodate these kind of things, you end up getting coaches who maybe it's like their side thing. You know, they're not really terribly experienced. They really are more experienced in another aspect, and then they kind of, well, I could kind of coach this. So I ran up to like a similar thing, feeling like I didn't have, not similar in coaching, but similar in feeling I wasn't growing the way I wanted to grow, and like the group that I expected to have around me wasn't quite as large or what I had hoped it would be.
Yeah, I think that kind of stuff has a huge impact on the fulfillment you get out of it and how effective you can be. And it is too bad that happens, and I feel like it might I don't know. I went to one school to compete, but I feel like it might happen more often than I would have originally thought.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, we talk about that a little bit in the course of the podcast, but also it's touched on in the guide, the idea that we're sort of promised, or we even maybe promise ourselves this fulfillment. If we can just get to that second summit, right? If we can just get past and push into that top tier, or that super top, 0.01%. And then oftentimes we get there or fail to get there. But even when you get there, you sort of go, oh, well, I thought it would be more.
Right.
Here we are now. Yes. All
right. So we I appreciate you kind of delving in on that. And it's not always a comfortable thing to talk about. And then, you talked about transitioning into another sport after college and more, with a mindset of, I want to do this because I want it to be joyful, right? I want to have something in my life that's active and athletic, but also I'm not trying to make it a slog.
Yeah, it kind of happened by accident. I was just watching my wife sub in on, I think, her cousin's team like 6-7 years ago. And I don't really like to sit around and watch people play sports that I could also do. Like, obviously, I can't play in the NFL, but I can play bar league volleyball. No, that's true. Or the size, or the speed, or a couple other things. But, so it took me watching twice to want to play. And so I did, and it was terrible, but it was fun. And there were a lot of parallels between diving and volleyball that I was able to kind of notice and follow along with, and then start developing skills pretty quickly, but it's still with a lot of work.
Sorry, I got to go back. Sorry, you said maybe the least likely sentence that's ever been said.
I was also unexpected.
Which is, there's a lot of parallels between volleyball and diving.
Yeah.
And I think we're about to expose my ignorance on diving.
Sure.
Tell me about the parallels, or tell us about the parallels.
Well, this is also why I asked about playing other ball sports, because my also naive assumption was that, diving might be much more akin to gymnastics, whereas volleyball would be more akin to basketball, for instance, right?
Sure.
But yeah, so hit us with it.
Yeah, so maybe it's the way my brain works. I'm not sure, but so when you dive, there's a certain rhythm you have to move with. There's a certain calculated approach to the end of the board when you're doing any forward dive or reverse dive, and when you're doing a backwards dive or inward, there's some sort of rhythm you have to have, which is the same or very similar to the hitting approach. So if you're a hitter in volleyball, front row player, the 4 steps you take before you jump and hit the ball are very similar to the 3 to 5 steps you take on the diving board when getting to the end. And so being able to control the spacing and the timing of those steps along with the jump was really, really natural for me. And the amount of elements that go into a volleyball hit, approach, and arm swing are really similar to the approach and takeoff and initiation of a dive off of the diving board. So it's not something I noticed immediately, but it was something I noticed quickly, and getting comments from people spectating about how high I could jump and stuff, and it was just, it's because I was a diver. That's it.
Who me? Oh, oh, okay.
It's no big deal.
No, it's no problem.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's I think it's pretty interesting to see that perspective. And we talk about this a lot in the guide. We talk about on the podcast about making use of skills that we already exist, that we already have, and putting those in play are very, very helpful. Of course, there's going to be, you're not going to get to decide when you're going to go hit the ball, or where it's going to be exactly. Like you can decide when to go when you're diving. That planning purpose is, I'm sure, going to be a little more on the fly. But it's interesting to hear how those two link, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, and like I said, it was a pretty natural transition, but only for that part of the game. Everything else, learning to play a team sport, learning to play a ball sport, learning things about court awareness and stuff, that was like a punch in the face, because that was all brand new.
Talking to one of my, so I teach dance as well, I was talking to one of my students recently. She used to teach gymnastics in Germany, and she was talking about how terrible, comparatively, all of the German athletes, like their hand-eye coordination is compared to like a lot of American athletes, because they play primarily, like soccer, for instance, is like one of their big
Right.
sports. So it's not, if there's kids out playing ball, that's probably what they're going to be playing. They're not going to be playing baseball. And she's just interesting how kind of even culturally, like that whole group of people has a very different, kind of situational awareness, as it were, or proprioceptional awareness compared to like somewhere else,
Oh yeah, for sure. It makes sense though.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
So take us kind of, because I know volleyball, or thinking about the various skills within volleyball, was something that you considered in the guide, and if I'm not mistaken, kind of discarded because you had this idea of like, well, there are other ways to kind of help myself be good at volleyball. Like being healthier would be a good way to accomplish a lot of other things in my life. And I know when we kind of initially talked, you had said like, oh yeah, I'm going to do a sort of whole health plan or a general health plan, but it sounds like maybe you narrowed in a little bit over time.
Yeah, I definitely focused up a little bit. So the initial goal was to, like, I had no intention of getting healthy to be healthier. It was specifically to get better at volleyball, which is crazy, but I'm thoroughly obsessed. Then I started noticing some changes to my body immediately, and that was awesome to see. And so then the goal became, well, let's just see how long I can do this for. It's obviously good for me, and I'm feeling great. So let's just do that.
Can I ask you aside quickly? What kind of like volleyball are you playing currently? Are you playing like on a league team, or what kind of like league are you on currently for volleyball?
So we're playing indoor right now. Pretty soon we'll be switching over to outdoor on sand, but mostly bar leagues.
Okay.
Although we've stepped up into the competitive divisions, and so it's not just bar league volleyball anymore. Like that's just the site where we play, but it is much more competitive than social activity to do. So
cool.
that's.
And do you guys do co-ed as well?
Yep. Yeah, it's 4 guys, 2 girls, and
Nice.
luckily I get to play with the wife, which is pretty cool.
It's good that it's luckily is what.
Oh, she's so good. We would be so
That's
doomed
great.
without
That's
her.
great.
Yeah.
So that is interesting. So Kath, your wife was a goalie, if I'm not mistaken, right? A soccer
Yep.
goalie
Yep.
in college,
no
high
way.
school and college. So definitely an athlete to begin with. Which, that's no secret that being an athlete for 20 years of your life will help you in your adult athletic pursuits. But is Catherine also, because you had said like we a couple of times when you were talking about your Get Good goal, is Catherine involved with the Get Good goal by the merits that you occupy the same household, or is it like, oh no, very purposefully trying to do this together?
Oh, it's just we're doing it together. We like to do things together, and so this is something really good to do. And I do think if we weren't living together, then maybe neither one of us would be doing it. I think it's really nice to have a partner in the guide to kind of like hold me accountable, and I can hold her accountable, that kind of stuff.
Eric and I talk about this all the time. If we were living together, things would be a lot easier. It's
Yeah.
weird. Very
Yeah.
strange.
It's true.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah, if we went with a sort of hetero life mates approach on the podcast, I think you'd probably have if not, maybe not daily, but every 3 weeks or every 3 times a week, we'd have the podcast episode.
We get a lot of different kinds of Get Good Guys questions, but it's fine.
Yeah, it'd be like Wednesday is the main feed. Friday would be like musings with Nick. Yeah.
When's that coming out?
I think we'll have to preview it. We'll see.
Yeah, sure.
So tell us about the Get Good goal, man. So what specifically are you working on?
To boil it down as simply as possible, be healthier. That is the goal. And the cool thing about that
Certainly
goal,
that obeys the 10-word limit, right?
It
Certainly you
does.
have achieved that.
yeah, I've got a little room to play with. But it's just such a wide kind of goal that there's a lot of things that I can do to kind of chip away at it instead of just, hey, there's this one thing I have to do over and over and over. the approach that like the mindset that I've got is, well, there's a lot of things that I could do to become healthier. And so if I do either a lot of some of them or some of all of them, they're all going to lead me down a path of getting to where I want to get to.
So you like the feeling of having a little bit of novelty, essentially, of being able to do different types of things to still work towards that goal versus I want to be very, very specific about my calorie count, and that's my one piece that I'm worrying about every day.
Yeah, exactly. It's not just the one thing. It's a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and it's working so far, which is good.
Take us through some of the sort of, I guess we'll call them sub goals, right? So the things that you've found either success with or struggle with, or just walk us through it.
I was talking with a friend, which kind of started this whole thing in the first place. Anyway, he was telling me about this thing that he did for 1 month, where he tried to remove all of the things that he did just for like personal pleasure. So like eating snack food or playing tons of video games or like indulging in anything that you didn't need to do. And he said it helped him get super healthy, and it kind of strengthened his mindset. Like, well, why am I doing this thing? And so for me, I tried to take that on in my own way. And so I was like, well, maybe I'll just stop like snacking. Maybe I'll just cut out sugar. Maybe I'll just stop drinking the drinks that I like. And that was pretty tough to just say, well, I'm just not going to do that anymore without having a goal in mind. And so creating this goal of just being healthier, and then most importantly, coming up with a plan, those were the first two things that kind of sparked it.
Yeah, it's interesting inspiration for sure.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. Take note of all that extra time, that especially if you're pretty specific about that extra time. Those little moments kind of creep in pretty quickly about that personal. I don't know if personal time's the right word, but that stuff kind of can creep in on you.
Oh, for sure. And just one of the things that my friend did say that kind of stuck with me is, he'd get up and go just look for a snack, potentially out of boredom, not sure. And he would go, why am I doing this right now? Mm-hmm. Am I hungry? Am I bored? What is the purpose of it? And then so I think he, on his like month where he did this experiment, it was kind of a good way to show himself, yeah, maybe I was just indulging. Maybe I just wanted that snack. I didn't really need it.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to emulate that.
Yeah, which in the long run could be okay, but I think just becoming aware of it is helpful. Actually, Eric, because you've done a couple of eating changes over the past year or maybe year and a half.
Couple years, yeah.
Kind of on and off as life has suited. But you said something to me that I haven't done much changing of my eating habits, but that really I thought was super interesting. That I'm not sure if you came up with it or you had read it somewhere about food is fuel. Mm-hmm. And I had asked you if there was like one specific thing that you really liked from what you had kind of worked on, and that was the phrase you gave me, our kind of 64-4 phrase, as it were. And I thought that was super interesting, and I find myself thinking about it quite often, actually. That phrase of food is fuel, and like, what am I doing? What am I going to be doing? What do I want to be fueling up for? And that can help me kind of sift through those moments of like, well, why am I eating this thing, or why am I not eating this thing?
Yeah. Well, and I think also what I'm kind of hearing you talk about is that it's your friend and then you have kind of undertaken this like intentionality boot camp, sort of like, hey, for 1 month or for one set period of time, I'm going to do everything I do with intention, right? If I want to be having a snack or if I want to eat something, I am going to do it because I intend to eat that, not because I got up out of boredom or I'm, we even create words like, oh, I'm feeling snacky. And it's like, are you? Like, what does that mean? Or, oh yeah, I sat down to play video games. I played for 4 hours. And it's like, well, what was your intent there? Because sometimes there is this intent of like, oh yeah, man, I have a video game group that I play with on, every other Thursday night or whatever. We play for 3 hours. So, it becomes a question not so much of, oh, I got to deprive myself in some sort of like, ascetic kind of way, but rather I just want to know why I'm doing things, or I just want to know that I'm doing things purposefully.
Yeah, that's kind of the idea behind my friend's, I guess, challenge that he did, was to figure out why we do the things we do.
Mm-hmm.
And the food one he said was helpful. Like he lost like a ton of weight in a month. Like he wasn't big by any means, but like I could notice a difference in him because I'd see him, once every week for our game, and throughout the month of him doing this thing. Afterwards, looking back, I noticed, oh yeah, wow, cool, I see that. And then something you guys said, the food is heal thing, is another quote that one of my volleyball world friends mentioned to me because he's a big fitness guy, and he mentioned specifically that food is just your fuel, man. And I noticed too, I would eat one of our planned meals when I was really hungry, and then afterwards I no longer wanted that thing that I thought I wanted, which was new for me. But it was also awesome because now I know, hey, if I just do what I'm supposed to do, I'm not going to have that craving anymore afterwards, and I will be better off for not having it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, so take us through the kind of the phase one of this process, right? So phase one in the guide is the going from thinking about an idea and setting a goal and then sort of pathing that or mapping that, where do I want to be versus where am I and what's in between me and that place. And then dipping the toe in the water. So what was the first thing? It sounds like maybe this month-long intention challenge was maybe the first thing. But what would you say you did to dip your toe in the water?
The first thing I did was agree to just try it, or at least to think about trying it. And then I just went online and was just looking for recipes, probably out of boredom. But I found someone on YouTube who I liked to listen to, and I discovered that the meal plan he was making was 1, super easy to make, 2, really cheap, and 3, it tasted good. And so those are 3 really good things if I wanted to get started on something that was going to be new and kind of a journey for me. Tasting good, being cheap, and also being easy to make is a great combination. So that was my first bit. I tried out his diet plan for 1 week, and from there things have changed, but we can talk about that in the next phase if you'd like to.
For sure.
Can I and again, if this feels like tricky to answer, don't feel obligated. Do you feel one of the units that we talk about often is the story you tell yourself unit? Did you, as going through the guide, did you feel like there was something about how you eat, or you had been eating or kind of doing that kind of stuff on a day-to-day basis, that you were kind of realizing that you were kind of creating this narrative around why you ate that way or why it was okay to eat that way, and how kind of that looks a little different now?
Yeah, I think before doing this, trying to look at the story that I was telling, I guess it's easier to do retroactively. So I look at now where I'm at and just say, oh, well, I probably would have said this or that. But so yeah, for me it was just, I don't know if I have time, I don't know how to cook, I don't have the equipment I need, which was all not true.
Sure.
And so just kind of ripping off the Band-Aid and just saying, okay, for this week I'm going to do this thing, and I'm going to stick to it. That was a cool way to just basically prove to myself, yeah, that story was kind of untrue. It was in the nonfiction section. Sorry, it was in the fiction section. Fiction.
We'll fix that. We'll fix that in post. All right.
We'll have our people fix that.
Yeah.
You want to take it again?
Jack, show me to.
No, it was good. It was really good.
You're fine. Okay, so that kind of takes us through phase one, but you had alluded to it already. Talk to us about phase two. How long was the first YouTube video you watched on this meal plan? That's what I want to know. Ballpark.
Conveniently, dude, 9 minutes.
You're kidding
What?
me.
No way.
It's as though we looked at this.
Right.
Fantastic. Yeah, very cool. So obviously you talked about hey, I was bored, so I kind of dinked around for 90 seconds, and then I found this guy, and then he had a 9-minute resource, and then I dipped my toe. That takes us through the end of phase one, my friend. So talk to us about phase two.
Well, and actually, just quickly before we do that,
don't talk to us about phase two.
Don't talk to us about phase two. I think it's worth noting for maybe some listeners that Austin, you are an educator yourself. So some of these things that we talk about in the guide research-wise, you may be doing a little bit more naturally or second nature-wise compared to someone who maybe isn't doing, isn't in education as on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's just interesting to hear from your viewpoint, kind of how that research stuff fell a little bit naturally into place, which is pretty cool. But anyway, all right. Phase 2, hit me with it.
2.1, the checkpoint reflection. So basically, after the first day, my wife and I both noticed that the food was really good. The first experience making the lunches that were like, we meal prep for the week, that took us approximately forever, give or take.
That's a rough estimate.
Yeah.
Rough estimate, yeah.
And we made such a mess. Because I think neither one of us, more so me, had no clue what we were doing in the kitchen. That's all me, actually. She knows what she's doing. We wanted to leave that behind, the taking forever and making a gigantic mess, so we had to kind of change up the recipe we were given from the YouTube video to make it more fitting for our lifestyle. So, for example, instead of buying chicken breast and pan frying it, because that is a pain in the butt and it makes a huge mess, we just decided to buy ground chicken instead, because we were chopping up the chicken breast anyway.
Sure.
And that was just a little shortcut, much less of a cleanup, and I think it was cheaper. I'm not sure. It was probably pretty similar. So that was a nice little, we looked back and made a little audible. And then we both noticed almost immediately physical changes, which were positive. Like for me, like a slightly smaller chest, or not as flabby, I guess, I don't know, in just a week, which was kind of insane, but also super inspiring to keep pushing and stick to it, because I think that one of the hardest parts is the repetition, getting into the grind of doing the thing and having it be the thing that you do kind of without interruption.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the cool things about choosing something to do with food, because that you get a very, very physical change, and that you can see it, right? It's substantial. Sometimes when you're pursuing skills of a different vein, you don't see that, you can't see the feedback in the mirror as much. So it's a cool internal motivation to oh, okay, this is working. This is happening.
Yeah, and the clothing fit better immediately, and it was just wild to see it work, and it was kind of really nice positive reinforcement to keep on keeping on.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think recognizing that success, especially early, and we talk about this all the time, but you're going to be at the absolute maximum acceleration of the learning curve or of the success curve, in phase 2, right, for those first few sessions, and that's where it can be really gratifying, right? And sometimes that's exactly what we need to be able to keep going.
Yeah, for sure. And as we progress through that first week or two of following the meal plan and stuff, I don't know if she was thinking it, but I was like, what's going to happen when I really want Taco Bell? Is that going to ruin everything? Am I going to have it once and then totally break off of this meal plan?
Mm-hmm.
Which I think could happen to some people for sure. They're like, oh man, that was so much easier. It took me no time, and it's pretty tasty food. And so then there goes the meal plan. But that didn't happen. I don't think that either one of us could totally stick to doing the meal plan exactly as intended every week forever, because things come up and we have to adjust on the fly.
It's not realistic.
No,
right?
not at all.
It's not realistic. And it's not enjoyable.
Nope.
Right? It's not enjoyable either to have only that very small, slim window of what's possible. And that's, we talk a lot about that in the guide, where if you're shooting for a 2% body fat, 3% body fat, you're going to not be any fun to hang out with, because you can't do anything.
Right.
Shooting for that kind of not that that's the pinnacle, but just as an example of
it's certainly the most extreme
for fitness, right? Of this percentage of the population, that really takes away a lot of the joy of being able to say, you know what, I'm feeling better. I'm I'm so much healthier. Like I like the way I look much better, but I can still like hang out with people and go out to dinner once a month if I need, if I want to. Is pretty much is where we want to be, and that's great.
Yeah, and I think that's huge too, because I do think not being able to do the things you want to do or the things you like occasionally is a real quick like time warp to giving up.
For sure.
So I feel like it would be almost instant for me if I had to give up the stuff that I enjoyed the most to stick to this plan that I found on YouTube.
Tell us, have you added anything? So where do you kind of think of yourself in the guide process? Are you in the grind set? Have you moved into phase 3, or are you maybe even past that, where you're kind of like, how do I maintain this, positive practice and not fall into the trap of more and more and more and getting more extreme and trying for more extreme results? Or where do you think you are in the get good goal sort of process?
I'm definitely at least partially in the loop. Maybe a little beyond, because we've been doing it now for, is this 3 months? Hold on. 1, 2. We're in the 3rd month. And at no point has it felt like anymore, like a slog that we're, like, it's like, man, dang, we got to do this thing. Maybe at nighttime if we forget to make our breakfast for the next day, it's like, oh, shoot, we got to do that. But it's not like something we're dreading, and it's becoming just routine now. Being in the 3rd month, we've done it many, many times now, and it just kind of is what we do, and that's totally fine with both of us.
Well, I think that speaks to you guys finding a pretty good balance, right, between what you want and what you can do realistically.
Right, I agree for sure. Like if we were making crazy gourmet 5-course dinners every night, there's no way to maintain that. People hire personal chefs for that reason, and they pay a ton of money for it. Like where we're making the same sort of stuff, maybe a little bit of variation here and there with the sauce or the side, but really just kind of sticking to it.
Yeah.
So that raises an interesting question. Part of phase 3, in the grind loop that you referred to as the loop, for those of us who are not quite as dedicated to the guide as perhaps you are,
step up your game, everybody else.
the loop refers to the grind loop in phase 3. And this idea of, okay, well, you got to do it, right? And so part of that loop is adding resources when necessary or when helpful. Have you come across anything else in this process? And this is, for the listeners, an authentic question. We didn't plan this out, even when Austin was kind enough to say that his initial resource was 9 minutes long. But I'm just authentically curious if you found yourself needing to add resources or wanting to add resources, as far as like you had mentioned maybe variations on recipes or something like that.
Yeah, so really within the first week of starting this whole process, I was messaging my health friend who's in the volleyball world, and he was very excited for us to be trying this out because he's a huge advocate for food and the types of food you eat and why. And so I sent him what I was planning on eating, and he gave me some alternatives or some things to add in. He's like, hey man, you probably need more protein if you're going to be playing volleyball that much, and if you want to build muscle, you're going to need this or that. And so he gave me some recommendations, and now those are things we kind of sprinkle in throughout our meal plan throughout the week, if we're needing a snack or something. So we've kind of learned the tricks to not fall into any traps when we really want to. There are times where we say, hey, do you want to go get this or that real quick? We can just have a snack day, and that's fine. But we just stick to the plan, and we know that we can use these alternatives if it gets boring at all.
I think it's good advice for everybody is that people are excited about things, and people want to talk about things they're excited about. So if you can find somebody that you already know who's interested in what you're doing, chat with them. They're going to be more than excited, more than happy to share with you and to kind of help you along the journey without anything in return. Really, they're just excited about it, and they want to help you with it.
Yeah, and I think immediately phase 1.1 basically just branch off what you're saying. The segment where you ask who's good but not great at it. That question was harder than I thought for my current goal of becoming healthier. And then the one day it just clicked like, wow, this guy that I'm pretty good friends with is really like good at this stuff. And he knows what he's talking about. And so that was kind of neat to kind of stumble into another resource that I had at my fingertips to kind of help me out through this goal.
Yeah, it's interesting, right? That question early on of like who's good but not great. There's a few intentions, well, there's a couple intentions behind that. One of them is accessibility, to your point, right? Like it's probably someone you know, and probably someone who would be willing to take a phone call or exchange texts with, as opposed to someone who wants to be paid for their expertise.
Sure.
There's also this idea that, like, I found this in a food journey as well. Like, some people who are great at certain skills are kind of insufferable about that skill, right? Like, if they're phenomenal nutritionists, or they really know their stuff when it comes to fitness, they can be kind of tough to listen to, because, and the example I'll use is, like, I had said to someone, this was when I was kind of reevaluating my food intake, and I said something about carrots. I was like, occasionally I'll have a snack like carrots with dill dip or something. And, previously I was eating like 3 pieces of cake and a bag of chips and a Slurpee, right? And I was like, yeah, so I've switched to kind of carrots and dill. And they were like, oh, carrots, boy, they have a lot of naturally occurring sugars. And I was just like, I'm done with you. We're not going to talk anymore. Like, you have no concept of where I was or what I'm trying to do.
Well, and I think that it's also true as, you often get kind of gaps in what they're telling you, because they expect you to have this knowledge already, or to them, so much of the knowledge that they've gained over time is knowledge that everyone has. They kind of forget, because they're so far past that point, that there's these building blocks that are pretty valuable, and someone kind of closer to your skill level, still sees those building blocks as more of a thing. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I'm with you on that one for sure. Yeah, It's just, you assume that they know all of the inside tips and tricks, and so you may say something that kind of skips over them, and they're like, well, what the heck?
Yeah. Well, I wonder too, because, like, I have to imagine that diving is a similar thing. Maybe before you were like, a top 10 New York State diver, when you were kind of learning. So I coached with a guy who was a really good linebacker. He was he played in the league, and he would try to coach these like JV kids. We were both on a lower level staff together, and so we're coaching 10th graders, and not that great a team. And so he would say things like, all right, so you're going to read this key, take your first step, and then just go dominate. And the kids would be like, what? Be like, yeah, man, just step down, put your nose in it, and just dominate, right? Hit the blocker, shed the blocker, make the tackle. That's all you got to do.
Easy.
And the kids would be like, I'm 130 pounds. Like, what are you talking about? Right. Because in his mind, like, when he said just go dominate, that was like 12 things that you just had to go do that he had learned to do over time, but in his mind it was just one thing, right?
Well, yeah, and they are one thing to him now,
right?
And that's how the skills, how we kind of accumulate skill, and that's wonderful. But it can be very difficult to kind of re-sift through those unless you're really intentional about it, for kind of serving someone else.
Yeah, I noticed that immediately when I attempted to coach for a little while. I don't think that I was great at it. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Were you like a school team? Were you coaching?
A school team. Also, a couple of private like lessons, one-on-one. But yeah, I got asked to step in for a little while, and I did a full season, and it was really tough. Did
you feel like it was enjoyable or not so much?
I did not like it one bit, and I never want to coach it again.
Well, no way.
Yeah, which was
especially
crazy.
Since you have the experience, and you're an educator as well. It's interesting, like seeing the difference between really liking to do the thing versus helping someone else do the thing. You know what I mean? Just enjoyment wise.
Yeah, it was shocking how little I enjoyed it compared to how much I enjoyed doing the thing.
Yeah.
And I think I've narrowed down the reasons for that. It's probably something that I probably couldn't overcome without a lot of work at getting rid of those personal traits that I've got that made it not enjoyable.
We talk about this in the guide a lot. Is like Is there a point to that? You don't have to be doing that if you don't want to. You don't do that thing. If it's not enjoyable for you or it's not important for your life goals, well then don't do that thing. You dive for you, and these other people can suck it.
Can I ask, Austin, what about volleyball? How do you feel? Because I've heard you talk about trying to help other people out or trying to help teammates get better, or like even other teams that are maybe not at kind of the higher levels of competition that you are at now. How do you feel about coaching? I guess coaching is the term I'll use, but like coaching volleyball.
I like it. I mean, I haven't coached it. I've helped people.
Sure.
I've attempted to help people. Yeah, I'm not sure. It feels different than when I was trying to coach diving. I'm still not an expert on volleyball at all. There's a lot that I don't know because I never played until a few years ago, and so a lot of the traditional knowledge I just don't have. But I can teach my experience in the process that I went through to get to my point of skill. And if that's helpful for someone, cool. If not, then I guess it would be ineffective. But I don't know. It just feels different than when I was coaching diving. I guess the times that I've tried to help people out here.
Well, and I mean, I would posit a thesis, which is that you were in the very uppermost echelon of diving as a participant. And so your perspective is sort of second summit, right? You went through the valley of despair. You know what all of that looks like, as opposed to volleyball, where you have maintained your joyful practice. I have never once heard you say a bad word about playing volleyball. All you ever talk about when it comes to volleyball is how obsessed and how much you love it, right?
That's true.
But if we were to compare your two sort of main athletic endeavors here in your life, one, you were in the top 0.01% of the population, and the other one you're merely good at.
Yeah, it's interesting to think about it that way for sure. One's more enjoyable than the other, I think. Maybe.
At this point, at least, right?
Yeah.
You know, you're so invested or have invested so much in diving that it might be hard to compare the two.
Yeah, and it feels like so long ago now because I've been done for 11 years with that, and so it's hard to say, I like this more than that, or
for sure
I enjoy this more. But
well, and that can things change, or over time. What kind of pulls our enjoyment at the moment can change.
Right.
Well, so talk to us about the future, man. So the last phase of the guide, phase 4, is about maintaining joyful practice and preventing ourselves from getting into the greatness trap, right? Where we try to add this and get better at that and get better at that, right? I mean, there's some obvious greatness traps when it comes to health, personal health and well-being. There are some obvious greatness traps when it comes to nutrition. What do you think? How do you feel about turning the corner onto phase 4?
The neat thing about this goal for me specifically is I don't want to be great at it. That
helps.
Yeah. I don't even understand all of the stuff that would go into being great at being super healthy. And so, I don't know more than I do know, if that makes sense. I know you know what I'm talking about.
Yes. We recently did an episode about uninformed optimism. So.
You did. And so I'm cool with just keeping on the way I'm going, maybe tweaking it here and there. Like I don't need to like measure my food exactly and count all of my calories to the decimal place and make sure I'm working out a specific amount of time every day. I just want to enjoy it. And if that is something I can stick with, that would be great. And so I don't want to push myself to a point of cracking like I did before, because that was one of the worst times in my life ever for a few reasons, but I don't want to go there again. And so if I can avoid that, that would be sweet.
Yeah. That's very cool. Well, my friend, I think we will have to have you on for a follow-up in some period of time and see kind of if and how the phase 4 units has been useful kind of in maintaining that joyful practice and avoiding those greatness traps.
Yeah, it sounds great.
Inaugural guest, it's happened.
Put it in the books.
That's right.
We do appreciate you, and I know it's a very early morning because some of us are family men and have a limited opportunity to escape the household and get recorded, get our recordings done before everybody wakes up. So we do appreciate you taking the early morning time and dealing with some of the illness that we had to cancel a couple times on Austin.
Geez.
Oh, that's no problem. Glad you're feeling better. I can hear you, and sounds like you're feeling healthier.
Yeah, man, we're getting there. We're
on our way.
we're not as healthy as you. Not all of us are using the Get Good guide there, buddy, to be
play
to be as healthy
volleyball,
as
living it
possible.
up, but it's fine.
That's
It's fine.
right.
Some of us are making bad life choices, but it's no big deal.
My suggestion is always to anybody to play more volleyball.
Fantastic. All right, well, we're going to try a little outro here with no practice and no rehearsal and the inclusion of a Get Good guest. So, Austin, when the moment feels right, you're going to say those magic words. As always, I'm Eric. That's Nick. That guy over there is Austin. We're the Get Good guys.
And this is the Get Good Guide.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Loved it.
Well, gee, thanks, everybody. We sure do appreciate you taking the time here on our inaugural Get Good Guest episode. You've been listening to Austin Deep Dig Devlin talk about his Get Good goal to be a little bit healthier. If you want a little bit more of that Get Good goal, by all means, join us over on the Patreon, patreon.com/getgoodguide, or head on over to the center of the Get Good Galaxy. They're at getgood.guide. Download a copy of the guide for yourself and get good. As always, I'm Eric. That's Nick. We're the Get Good guys.
And this is the Get Good Guide. I was nervous when calling the radio station. And what are you listening to? I don't freaking know.
I don't know.
Just give me the tickets.
I forgot. I just want the Billy Joel tickets.